Yes. Control yourself. No.
Progress.
Heidi, it should be starting soon. I'm going to, oh, look, there's all the people. Okay. Start video.
Yes, it's 9 o'clock. Shall we start? I'll take the call this meeting to order at 9 o'clock. Esther, can you take a roll, please?
We have Chair John Mende, Vice Chair Gary Mackler, Secretary Sean Sasaki, Directors Melvin Kahele, Gloria Chang, Mike McCartney, Sabrina Nasser.
Okay. Very good. We have a quorum. Thank you. One thing before we move on, I just wanted to ask any of the directors if there was anyone attending with you physically at your location. If so, can you mention who and just state their name? No? Okay. Very good. So let's move on to item 2A. Approve the regular meeting minutes for the meeting of January 13th, 2022. Can I get a motion, please?
So move.
Thank you, Gloria. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thanks, Mel. Any discussion? Any additions or deletions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Thank you. Motion passes. So moving on, just I guess I wanted to bring on Francis to see if he can explain the public testimony guidelines before we move on.
Thank you, Chair Mendy. Before I do that, I noticed that we do have a new board member, a director on our board. And I believe our ED, our executive director, was going to introduce her to the other board members and to the public.
Oh, yes, please.
Good morning, board members. Thank you very much, Francis. It's my pleasure to introduce Sabrina Nasser. She is the Senior Special Assistant in the Governor's Office, and she is the Governor's rep on this board. Prior to joining the Governor's Office, she worked at the East-West Center and also at the Legislature and the Ways and Means Committee. She holds a bachelor's in economics and also a master's in demography with a focus on residential segregation and housing outcomes. Aloha and welcome to the board.
Welcome.
Welcome aboard, Sabrina. Glad to have you aboard.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yes, yes, so thank you also for being here.
Sure.
So if I may,
Yes. One second, President. Mike, you had something?
Yes, I'd like to clarify and apologize to the board. My name still says Baboos on there, but I don't know how to change it. I tried to change it this
I
morning
just changed it, Mike.
It's changed now. Oh, yeah.
because I always am a Baboos, but for the record, my heart comes up that way. Thank you for changing it. Bye.
Okay, thanks, Essa. Thanks, Mike. Okay, Francis.
yes, okay, the rules on providing oral testimony at this board meeting. Thank you, Chair Mendy. Anyone wishing to provide oral testimony should indicate that to the chair. Oral testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, subject to the discretion of the chair. And oral testimony must be on a matter that is on the board agenda. Therefore, as you begin your oral testimony, you should identify yourself and spell your name for the record. After 3 minutes, I will call time and you will have another 15 seconds to conclude your testimony. Anyone wishing to submit only written testimony, instructions for doing so are at the bottom of the front page of the agenda. So thank you for your cooperation in this matter.
Thank you, Francis. And for this meeting, I'll be calling public testimony to the various subject agenda items after the staff presentation of those agenda items. So moving on to item 2A, so since Chris Woodard has legislative hearings to attend to this morning, we'll be actually taking some items out of order in the agenda. Items 4D and E will be taken first. Chris will be giving his presentation, followed by public testimony. So item 4D, information on a possible ground lease extension for the Hau'oli affordable rental housing project located at Manana Uka, Ewa, Oahu, TMK 097094021. Chris, since this is for information, there's no action.
Correct, yes. Good morning, Chair and members of the board, and welcome Director Nasser. Again, as Chair said, this is an informational item only. Hau'oli is a 100-unit elderly housing project located in city. It was built in 1978. All one-bedroom units, and it's about a 1-mile walk from the Pearl Highlands Heart Station, which is under construction. This property was last renovated 20 years ago. It's currently financed with low-income housing tax credits and private activity bonds. It also has a HUD Section 8 HAP contract attached to it. So HHFDC owns the land in fee simple. We have a ground lease to an entity. The ownership group is an entity controlled by David Page. There are about 37 years left on this ground lease, and the rent is a nominal $1 per year.
Yes.
So there's a contemplated transaction here. A buyer group led by Paul Fortino would like to acquire this property, the leasehold interest in it, and recapitalize it with 4% low-income housing tax credit. We received a request for a lease extension from that buyer group, which is included in the board materials. And I note that the executive director has the authority to grant the lease extension request, and that's pursuant to the new board policy that was approved last November. That being said, I wanted to inform the board of this request before we go ahead and actually agree to extend the lease for this property. That's because we rejected a prior request in 2016. The reasons for rejecting the lease extension request were twofold, but related. The project, as I mentioned, is very close to the Pearl Highlands Heart Station. And at the time that we had received the request, the TOD Council had just been established by the legislature. So we declined the request to grant the extension at that time. We do, however, intend to grant the extension this time. And that's why I'm bringing it to the board's attention. Let me just list the reasons. We do agree that there's long-term redevelopment potential for this property and the surrounding properties. I note that we own the leased fee interest in the Manana Gardens Manana Gardens property located across the street from Hollywood. But staff does not believe that redevelopment is imminent. At the time that we received the request in 2016 to extend, that was 8 years ago. Sorry, six years ago. And the rail was supposedly 8 years away from being opened. 6 years later, the rail is 9 years away from being opened up. So there's the rail issue. We'd have to negotiate a buyout of the existing lease with the existing lessee. If we take back the property, we'd have to own and operate it for a period of time. We've been systematically getting out of that business, selling off properties and leasehold over the past, 4 or 5 years. Not only will we have to own and operate it, it needs rehab. My colleague Lons and I visited yesterday. It's looking pretty tired and is in need of substantial rehab. We'd have to coordinate with other governmental entities to come to a plan to essentially assemble land in the area for redevelopment. And we'd have to issue an RFP for that redevelopment while we own and operate it, while it continues to need a renovation. And that would result in some displacement of tenants that we'd have to address. In short, this is going to take many years and cost quite a lot of money and requires a lot of coordination with other governmental agencies. So unless we hear as a staff that the board has a real concern about entering into a lease extension, we do intend to execute a lease extension in connection with the LIHTC Act rehab transaction. And I note that, even if we sign a 75-year lease, frankly, the new buyer is probably going to come back to us in 20, 25 years because they're going to need the rehab to rehab the property again at that time. This was originally built in the early or mid 70s, I think, late 70s, I'm sorry. So, entering into a new 75-year lease does not prohibit redevelopment for the next 75 years. Reality is there'll be another opportunity to take a look at this in, say, 20 years when I think redevelopment of that particular area will be more imminent. Again, we're on the fringe, we're on the periphery of the TOD zone. We're a 1 mile walk away. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Chris. Is there any questions from the board?
Chair, I don't have a question. I have a comment.
Okay.
No, I agree with the assessment, Chris. I think given the amount of time since the last renovation and the looking forward when it's going to be needed again, which may be now, as you've indicated, I think it makes sense to work with the new owner for new lease terms. I have a question on the TOD. Is there any discussion, given that it's about a mile away from a walking distance, is there any discussion about trying to transit from this project to the rail? Because looking at the population that lives there, it's going to be difficult for a lot of folks to make it that 1 mile walking. And just curious.
I can get back to you, Director Mackler. I can't answer it offhand, but I can tell you, being at having been at the property yesterday, there's a dedicated handy van stop on site.
Okay.
So Don Quixote's kind of like a block away. There are services in the area, but
Okay.
I can't specifically answer your question regarding any particular planned shuttle or service or anything like that.
Okay.
I also note that Catholic Charities is on site regularly at this property, just, helping to link seniors with services. So
Okay.
I would imagine something like that would be implemented once the rail finally opens.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Gary. Any other questions for the board? Excuse me. If not, is there any public testimony on this agenda item? I see one. Okay, go ahead.
If I give public testimony on this subject, does that limit me to the other topics on the agenda?
You can testify for each agenda item if you want.
I was reading here that it says, thank you for that, that possibly the land would become condemned if you had to do more development. What would that process look like?
Okay. Hi, Leilani. We haven't seen each other in a while.
Hello.
So condemnation would only be used as a last resort in the event that the state wanted to redevelop the property, but it remained encumbered by a long-term ground lease, and we were to be unsuccessful in negotiating with the ground lessee as to a buyout of the lease. So at the end of the day, the state could initiate condemnation proceedings to undertake redevelopment, but we would obviously try to negotiate a friendly early termination of lease with the current lessee to execute a redevelopment plan.
I have another question. So I just am concerned because this is an elderly home. And so if it was to be condemned or you was to take over the property, what would be the plans to relocate these elderly?
So yeah, I mentioned temporary tenant displacement when I spoke earlier. I can't answer your question specifically right now because we indeed have no plan to condemn the property or otherwise terminate the lease early. We're talking about actually extending the lease right now.
That's what I'm hopeful.
Allowing the buyer to undertake an acquisition rehab. So
Yep.
It's probably 20+ years off that we'd have to actually have that type of discussion.
All right. I just want to make sure that we have a policy and something in play for something devastating like that. But I'm
Sure,
hoping
yeah,
that
we're absolutely not out to displace seniors from their homes.
Mahalo.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Is there any other public testimony for this item? If not, I'll move on to item 4E, discussion on a policy and strategy for lease rent renegotiations for the Waihole Valley Agricultural Park and residential lot subdivision located in Waihole. Ku'olau Poko, Oahu, TMK 048, various.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So Waihole Valley, HHFDC owns in fee simple 122 lots totaling almost 600 acres in the valley. Most of these lands were purchased in 1977 under threat of condemnation from the Marks estate. And about 100+ acres of that was acquired in 1993 at the direction of the legislature. And we got those lands from DLNR. After the initial Marks estate acquisition in the late 70s, our predecessor agency, Hawaii Housing Authority, made road, drainage, and utility improvements. We also built the potable water system that serves Waihole Valley referred to as the Waiole Water System, that we continue to own and operate today. Of those 122 parcels, most of them are leased out. We've got 92 long-term ground lessees, 50 plus of those are residential, 30 plus are agricultural, and 2 are commercial lessees. All of these leases expire in June 2023. There is a 20-year extension option built into subdivision leases. And I should note that these leases are generally not financeable. They function much akin to long-term use permits. As far as the residential lots go, average lot size is about a ½ acre. Average monthly lease rent is $119. For the ag lots, they range considerably in size, topography, shape, soil composition, but from about 1.5 acres to over 50 acres, an average size of 8 acres. And the average monthly base rent for the leased agricultural lots is $110. There's also a percentage rent provision that's paid annually based on sales of farm products generated out the property, and table 1 shows you the recent history of those payments. I note that the agricultural lots do allow for residential use, and in fact, most lots do have dwellings on them. And again, 2 commercial lots, they're both located at the foot of Waiole Valley Road, where it intersects with Kamehameha Highway. Many of you are probably familiar with one of them. It's the home of the Waiole Koi Factory. They pay a monthly rent of $160. They also are our biggest by far percentage rent remitter in the valley, because they are paying us based on a percentage of their food sales. And then adjacent to that parcel is a former farm stand that hasn't been used in many years. And rent for that lot is the same as for any agricultural lot, $100 per acre per year. In this case, a little over $2 a month. All these leases, so again, they're in 92. We've got a couple, I think 2 or 3 pending leases that are just kind of housekeeping items that have lingered over the years that are finally taken care of. But over 90 leases, they all open up for renegotiation of rent for the next 15-year period. That period starts on June 30th, 2023, so next year. And the leases do require that we begin negotiations with the lessees this June. The dispute resolution mechanism in all of the leases is arbitration, although the ag leases do have mediation as a required intermediate step. I would be remiss about talking about Waiole Valley without mentioning the strategic plan that we a project that we began in 2017. That project remains ongoing, most recently hampered due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The work is ongoing. And as it relates to the lease renegotiations, we have had a couple of meetings with the community. One was at the invitation of the Waiole Waikani Community Association. We made a short presentation in October 2020. And then we, HHFDC ourselves, we held a virtual community meeting in April of last year. I think the tentative plan is to hold another meeting this year before we formally start lease rent renegotiations. So that should probably be in April or May. And just a final note, I mentioned that we had spoken about the lease rent renegotiation timeline and process with, or at the invitation of the Waikane Community Association in 2020. They did subsequently notify us that they had engaged a law firm to help advise them and members on the rent renegotiation process. So with that said, Chair, may I suggest that the board entertain a motion to enter into executive session to discuss this matter?
Okay. Should we take public testimony before or after the session? What do you think would work better?
Frankly, I could go either way on that, Chair. So I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts, but
Maybe
it might be easiest to do it now.
Yeah, maybe we should go. What, the executive session or take the public?
Oh no, sorry. Take testimony.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking because I'd like
Okay.
to give the board member the opportunity for the board members to have the public testimony before we go into executive session. So, is there anyone that want to give public testimony for this agendized item? Okay, go ahead. I see one.
Is that me?
Yes.
Oh, aloha. Thank you. So the public,
Could you state your name, please, before you?
yes, my name is Leile Hualani Kane Tapado.
Thank you.
I'm from Waihole Valley. I currently am the member manager of our company, which is Kaneohana Property Management LLC.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I see that the topics on the agenda I have to stay close to. And first I wanted to ask that, I wanted to ask if my brother Elijah Kane is also present on this. He also wanted testimony.
I believe he is. He can go after you.
Oh, good. Okay. I heard you said only one.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Oh, so the subject is that we need assistance with our lease as well as not only ours, but others. And there's many topics here on your line E in your action plan for discussion that I would like to talk about many of the aspects. But as Chris has mentioned that the agriculture lot lease rents for agriculture lots are roughly $110 to $160. Our lease rent has been increased throughout the years, and it's very, very high. So I wanted to know if the board is going to have that on their agenda so that we can discuss it and have the fair rate that is here in your covenants. Would that be able to be added to the agenda today?
I think the lease rents will come up sometime in the future.
Oh.
So Chair, if I could just add some clarification there.
Sure.
The Kane Ohana, and someone from development branch jump in if I have this incorrect, but the Kane Ohana property, I believe, is on a revocable right of entry and not a long-term ground lease. So today we're talking solely about, this is how it was agendized, I don't know the proper word is. But today we're just talking about scheduled rent renegotiation of the 92 existing long-term ground leases in Waihole Valley. The Kane Ohana agreement does not fall within that category. And Dean, someone else, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, Chris, that's correct. The Kane Ohana is not a lease, it's a right of entry. So the lease negotiations that Chris is talking about are for the long-term leases and renegotiation of those leases. So the vacant lots that are currently on a right of entry basis would be separate from this renegotiation.
So why are we discriminated against and not part of it?
Excuse me. You'll have your turn next.
Okay.
So here on your agenda, it talks about the occupied permittees under revocable right of entry agreements. When we had a long-term lease, that you actually gave us a lease for 3 years, we were under the impression that once it went from that, it was going to go right into a long-term lease. We feel that we've been terminated, and Hawaii Housing Finance has made a mistake in how they have negotiated and gave us what we have currently. So it leads all the subjects that are, I'm sorry, is someone speaking?
No.
So we're asking for consideration
Okay.
to be. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next, I guess, Elijah, you have your 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Yes, aloha, Elijah Kane, part of Kane Ohana. We were being represented by Jason Takata. No longer, I guess you guys don't know who we are, what we're doing. We're kind of left in the dark. So we're asking to be part of our community, part of this discussions, to add us in when you do mention Waihole, put us in there. We've been waiting patiently for generations now. We need to be part of it. Don't just keep throwing us in the dark room and treating us like we're just some adopted child. So this is why this discussion on this particular topic. Add us in. Let us continue paddling our canoe. Don't cut us off. We part of this community. We part of all the rules that's put play. So yeah, the lease isn't written correctly today to be part of that. So we're asking for that opportunity to be part of our community, not only out there feeding our community, working hard on our land, but to be a part of these discussions. So we'll be appearing more because we thought we were being represented, but we're not. So the Hawaiians of the community, which is us and our ohana and our families, is we need a voice. We need to be able to sit at the table and talk about these discussions. So that's what we're asking for today, is that don't count anybody out in the community. We're part of that leases. So treat us fairly, treat us as a tenant and be our landlords, and let's move forward. Let's see more. That's all I ask. Simple testimony. Please let us continue. We're on a 45-day. You guys gave us cutting us off before we can even get into negotiation. There's a lot of things on the table where we need a voice. We need to speak. We need to hear. You guys need to hear the truth. What's going on out there? Come to the Aina. Walk out there with your physical eyes. Come touch. Come feel. Come see who we are. Meet us as a people. Let's go. Let's go. That's all I'm saying. But anyways, keep this short. All I ask is for opportunity, and please don't cut us short. Just add us in so that we can be part of the long-term negotiations, because we did a lot of hard work out there. We make a lot of medicine. We feed a lot of the community. Through COVID, we have a lot of medicine growing. We're helping a lot of people. So please add us in, give us a little bit of continuing. Somebody reach out to us and communicate directly, because we've been misrepresented. So we want to be represented correctly. And much mahalo to all of you for all of your hard work, and coming from a voice from the Hawaiian community of Waihole, Elijah Kane. Aloha.
All right. Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else? Okay. Thank you for your testimony. If not, the board of directors of the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation anticipates convening an executive session pursuant to section 92.5A4 Hawaii revised statutes to consult with the board attorney and on questions or issues regarding the board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities as it relates to the matter. So can I get a motion to go into executive session?
Motion, Don.
Thanks, Mel. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thanks, Gary. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. All right, we will move into executive session. Thank you.
You're not a leaser.
Oh,
D. Oh no.
oh, man.
There she is. Go up.
Oh, what?
Yeah, go up.
Oh.
Yeah.
My cat.
Hello. Let me see. I think
It's mute? No. Can you hear me?
All right, is everybody back in? All right, so well, we're gonna take a 10-minute break before we resume. So it's 10:37 right now. So we'll be back in session at 10:47.
Oh yeah, I got it because I had a phone call with her.
Oh, lucky you.
Dean is doing it from his office.
All right. Good morning, everybody. 10:47. Let's back into session. Moving on to item 4A. Oh wait, Essa, are you there? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Is Sandy here? Yeah, I see Sandy. Okay. All right. So item 4A. This is to approve proposed new chapter 15-319 water service to consumers Hawaii administrative rules establishing uniform practices governing water services in the Waihole Valley and to define the obligations between HHFDC and the consumers. So I guess this is an action. So can I get a motion, please?
Motion been done.
Thanks, Mel. Can I get a second?
Second, Mike McCartney.
Thanks, Mike. All right, so who's taking this one?
I'm taking it,
Oh,
Chair.
okay. Thanks, Dean.
Okay, good morning, Chair Mende, board members. I have a presentation that I'll be sharing for this item. Let me just share my screen. Can you see the presentation?
Yep.
Okay, good morning. Quick background about the Waihole potable water system. The system was built in 1989. And so even though the water system was built over 30 years ago, there are no administrative rules in place. And this impedes HHFDC's ability to manage the system. To give context, the system is relatively small. It serves the Waihole Valley community, and there are about 117 water customers, and average daily demand is about 100,000 gallons per day. As you're aware, the purpose of administrative rules is to provide clear rules of governance so that there is consistency and predictability in decision making. So these proposed rules will establish rules and procedures for items such as who can receive water service. And I'll note that everybody who's on the system now will continue to receive water service, but the rules also set boundaries for the system. It establishes who needs to pay to start water service and allocates cost among HHFDC and the customer. It specifies what type of maintenance is required by water customers, what HHFDC can charge for water, and under what circumstances water could be discontinued. So some of the key provisions of the administrative rules is that, well, to start off with, everyone will have to apply for service. That includes current customers. And the reason for that is that we have to ensure that there is the proper person on each account, and we have up-to-date contact information. In the past, like last year when we had the system from the storms, there was the danger that water service would be interrupted, and we had a hard time contacting a number of customers because we didn't have up-to-date information on them. Also note that for agricultural lot, backflow preventers will be required and annual inspections will be required. In 2020, you might recall that there was concern that the water system was contaminated. Follow-up testing didn't show any contamination was present, but it is possible that contamination could come from agricultural lines, and backflow preventers will prevent contamination. For new connections, HHFDC will install the new meter and bill the customer for the work done. Again, this is only for new service connections. Also, to establish an account, there are some customers who are delinquent in payments, so those customers will need to become current to continue to receive water service. The rules allow for discontinuation of service for non-payment of bills, non-compliance with rules, or unauthorized use of water. Most customers are in good standing, but for those who aren't, the rules would allow us to disconnect those customers. And last, the rules allow us to establish water rates, which I'll focus on for the remainder of this presentation. For the water rates, note that the water rates being charged now have not changed for 30 years. So we're charging the same rate that was charged in 1989. During the strategic planning process, we had communicated to the community that a goal was to establish rates to allow the water system to break even on operations and maintenance costs. However, after looking at the numbers, we don't feel that this is a reasonable goal, and I'll go over that more in detail. In order to break even on just operation and maintenance costs, and not including capital costs, water rates would have to increase by 20 times. And we realized that water is an essential need, so we can't charge that amount for water service. We also recognize that some farmers use this system to irrigate their crops. So for those farmers to continue to make to continue to farm viably, we also have to set a reasonable agricultural rate. So the bottom line is we're trying to establish a rate that is fair and reasonable. Just very quickly, this slide shows the operating expenses and income for Waiholi Valley. The water items are shown in yellow. As you can see, the water system operations and maintenance ranges from $150,000 to $800,000 per year, and the variance largely depends on the extent of repairs that are necessary. Last year, extensive repairs were needed because of the flooding that occurred at the well site. Water revenue is pretty constant at about $17,000 per year, and the 5-year average deficit is about $360,000 per year. So just a quick math, you can see that water revenue would have to increase by 20 times to cover costs, but that's not what we're going to propose. These are the current water rates along with the proposed rates, and the Board of Water Supply rates are shown in italics. The residential rates would apply to those lots designated by the DCCNRs as residential. Agricultural rates would apply to those lots designated as agricultural in the DCCNRs without a dwelling. If an agricultural lot has a dwelling on it, then the mixed agricultural rate would apply. And this tier structure follows the structure used by the Board of Water Supply and is intended to encourage conservation. For the residential and mixed rates, at the lower tiers, the rates are lower, recognizing that water is an essential need. At the higher tiers or higher usage, water is priced higher to encourage conservation. You also notice that our residential and our mixed rates are about 10% higher than the Board of Water Supply's rate. And this is because we simply don't have the economies of scale of the Board of Water Supply. If the Board of Water Supply's rates cover capital costs as well as operations and maintenance. And we can't even consider putting capital costs into our rate structure. For agricultural rates, we felt that the Board of Water Supply rate was too high, it would be a burden for farmers. So our rates that are proposed are substantially lower than the Board of Water Supply rate. The Board of Water Supply rate is $2.12 per 1,000 gallons for the higher tier. So for large farms, they're paying about $2.12 per 1,000 gallons. And our rate is 70 cents per 1,000 gallons. So it's about 66% below the Board of Water Supply rate. So in summary, the residential and mixed rates follow the BWS tier and rate schedule, but is about 10% higher. The agricultural rate is 66% below the Board of Water Supply rate because we want to ensure that farming is still viable in the community. Based on current usage, the proposed rates will generate about 117,000 annually in revenue. So this is about $100,000 more than current revenue, but this will only cover about a third of operating costs. In order to provide customers time to adjust to the new rate schedule, the rates will be phased in over 3 years. In the first year, customers will be credited 67% of their water bill, so they'll only pay 1/3 of the water bill. In the second year, the credit will be 50%, and in the third year, the credit will be 33%. We also want to avoid establishing a static rate schedule that doesn't change, because this just leads to a sudden increase down the line. So we are proposing that the rates be tied to the consumer price index to avoid sudden rate increases in the future. This slide shows the median water bill, and I'll note that this slide is different from the one in your packet and was in our on our website. It was pointed out by a community member that the numbers weren't working out, and went back and found that one of the numbers was transposed. So it was the numbers for the agricultural, residential, and residential categories. The median monthly use numbers were transposed. The charge numbers are correct. It's just the use numbers are transposed. So as you can see, with the proposed rates, water bills will go up about 5 to 6 times. Again, this slide here is updated to provide the most recent information. We had a community meeting on February 1st, and we had a follow-up meeting with the Waiholewa Community Association Steering Committee this past Monday. And based on that input, we'll be having at least 2 more meetings with the community on March 7th and 21st to provide more information on the administrative rules. If the board approves moving forward, a public hearing will be scheduled later this year. And any public input received during community meetings or public hearings will be considered when finalizing the rules. If there are any substantive amendments, then we'll bring back the board will be required to approve those amendments. And the rules are finalized when they are approved by the governor. So the staff's recommendation is that the board of directors approve proposed chapter 15 319 HAR, subject to approval as to form by HHFDC's Deputy Attorney General and the governor's approval, and authorize HHFDC or the executive director to conduct a public hearing on the adoption of these rules. We also request that the board of directors authorize the executive director to make any non-substantive amendments to the draft following the public hearing, and that subsequent to the public hearing, to authorize the executive director to transmit chapter 15 through 19 HER to the governor for final approval. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Dean. I guess before I go to the board for questions, is there any public testimony on this agenda item? Do I see 1, 2? Sorry, Dean, I'm trying to look at the. Okay, so I think there's Elijah and I'm sorry, what was your name? I'm sorry, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. You have your 3 minutes.
It is important for us to talk about the water and the increase of the water and the health of the water in Waihole Valley. We ask that we have continuous meetings regarding this. So there's a negative amount of money that is not being brought in. I understand what you're saying. So I'm asking the board if they are charging the waters that are being sent over to the other side of the island. Is there a fee for the lost waters of Waihole? The waters that's being shipped over to the other entities, properties, and businesses. Can we gain revenue to bring it back into the valley so that the people, the farmers, and the community with Waihole Waikane don't have to have this burden when the money can come from the outside people utilizing those funds? It's very important. The health of the water is very important to us, and we want more studies done. We want more assistance, as we all need water, but the community in Waihole depends on the water, and the water was free. And then we talk about the infrastructure of the water tank. Yes, that needs to be cared for and taken care of, and also the land in which the water is being brought in. So if we could have a meeting with you folks, we have many concerns. Outside of only the Waihole Community Association, there's other individuals in the valley, such as our family and ourselves and others, that have a need for the water. So to increase the rates at this time, without all the other discussions being addressed, we ask that you preserve the rights of the Hawaiians that have the water rights to enter into getting the water for our irrigation and for our farms. If
All right,
that
thank
could
you.
be an add to the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Elijah, did you want to say something?
I know when Mr. David Chanen, he was our former president, he proposed about so much cents per gallon the community bringing in because he knows the waters were being taken over the hill. So I know in discussion, Red Hill is a big problem. We know more water is going to be needed, so we know where it's going to come from. So those kind of revenues is we need to put on the evaluation of our breakdown so that we can, look over the cost of, you need some water, put a number on it. So that's basically what's going to happen is you got everybody over that hill, numbers got to go up. Everybody on this side in this valley, we need to balance that out. So that's basically, what we need to put on that put some figures on what about the cost of the water going over the hill. So Mr. Chanan proposed that we get per gallon. We got to go back. I got to go back, look in those records. I got some of that to pull back up, to put back on the table for discussion from our forefathers. But thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Is there any? Okay, if not, back to the directors. Anybody have any questions for Dean? No? Okay. I just had one. So Dean, if the board approves now, then we'll still have opportunities for public testimony, right? Or public conversation, right?
Yes, we'll be meeting with the WWC. They formed the committee, and we already scheduled meetings with them for March. And there will be a public hearing scheduled after those meetings. So there will be opportunities for public input.
Okay. All right. So I guess, wait, Mike, I think, Mike, you need to be on camera if you're going to vote.
Yeah, so I need to log off.
Okay.
Because somehow my phone said I was moving around. It went into the safe mode, but I was just walking in my house. So I'm going to, if you can bear with me, I'll just log back on.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, so I guess we're on item 4A. Calling for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I
Yeah? Any
I just-
opposed? Oh,
clarify my aye that I'm voting aye with HRS 5-7.5 Section B as my reason why I'm voting aye. Thank you.
okay. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. So Sandy, because that's still an aye, we don't need roll call, right?
That should be fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to item 4B. This is to approve the recommendations of the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation Leasehold Policy Permitted Interaction Group. Can I get a motion, please?
I move Mike McCartney.
Thanks, Mike. Second?
Second, Don.
Thanks, Mel. All right, who's doing the presentation for this?
I am.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. The Leasehold Policy Permitted Interaction Group was created at the December 2018 board meeting as described in the attached Exhibit A of this board action. At last month's January board meeting, the group submitted its findings and recommendations attached as Exhibit B of this board action. The recommendations of the group are consistent with HHFDC's mission and are summarized in Section 3A of this board action. Recommendation is made that the HHFDC Board of Directors accept and approve the recommendations of the group and authorize the Executive Director to undertake all tasks necessary to effectuate the purposes of this board action. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorna. Is there any questions from the board? Wait, oh, sorry, wait, is there any public testimony on this item? Go ahead.
I have a question. It says that the lease fee interest is not available for purchase. The extension is necessary for the mortgages. We're talking about ceded lands, and if it's ceded lands, will it be purchased by Native Hawaiians?
I don't believe ceded lands can be sold, so it has to be leasehold.
And when it's leasehold, is it being purchased for Native Hawaiians within the Department of Hawaiian Homelands?
I don't believe so. It depends, because if it's HHFDC lands, it could be ceded, but we won't. They're not for sale. They're for lease.
Yes.
Yeah.
Will you sell the leases to the Native Hawaiians? Because there seems to be with the Department of Hawaiian Homes not enough of these lands for sale for lease for long term for Hawaiian housing.
I don't believe that's a question for this meeting. That's not the issue here. The issue here is the lands that are for lease is just the rules for the leased lands. This isn't the discussion for sale or not. And
I was looking at number 2 because it talks about the purchasing.
there are some properties that are for purchase, but none of them are ceded lands.
So you folks are going to extend their leases or not going to extend their leases?
Each case is case by case, but I mean that's what this is for, is to find out a starting point for the lease.
I'd like to know if there's some good input in this, and I'd like to know if Waihole Valley can also mimic those types of leases that are being offered here. If it's good for us, I mean, we'd have to study it.
This I think Waihole Valley is a different conversation. I don't think the leases are up yet. I think. All right, any other questions? If not, any questions from the board? All right, calling for the question, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. So I think Denise had to run off to testify at the ledge, so we won't have a executive director report right now. So I guess there's nothing else. Is there anything else the board wants to bring up? If not, can I
Dean,
get a motion to adjourn?
Don, before
Yeah.
you do that, I think, is there not an agenda item that we didn't discuss yet?
Oh, sorry, yes. Thank you. Item 4C on the agenda actually will be deferred to a later board meeting. There's some changes to the project that came up that needs to be taken care of. So item 4C will be deferred. Thank you for that, Gary. I don't know why I looked over that.
Have the questions been answered? The questions.
Excuse me? What is that, Mike?
I wanted to, before we close the meeting, just say that I am really impressed with Denise and the staff and the way they're conducting themselves at the legislature. So as a board member, I just wanted to report that to the rest of you and thank the staff and Denise for what they're doing. They're doing a lot of important work there, and I think they should be commended for what they've been doing so far. I wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mike.
Chair, if I may, just briefly, since Director McCartney brought up the legislation, I did want to mention that there is a GM 637 where the governor is nominating Gary Mackler for a second term in this board. So I just want to mention that the GM stands for governor's message and not Gary Mackler.
Gary Mackler?
But his name has been submitted to the Senate for confirmation. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Francis. Good luck. Well, if you need support, let me know. All right. Thanks.
So we adjourn.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thanks, Mel. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
None? All right. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.